Welcome back. So what we've got here, we've got the fuel pressure regulator that lives in the fuel pump, which is like a conventional Bosch reg. You'll see that it has no vacuum fitting or anything else. It lives inside the fuel tank. Basically the way it works is the fuel pressure from the pump goes in through here, and then it bleeds off what it doesn't need out of this port here. So it actually controls the maximum fuel pressure going to the front of the engine on the Renault Megane 3 RS, be it a 250, a 265 or a 275. This unit here, this is probably the most misunderstood unit from what I've been able to see. No one really understands what it does. It is a kind of a regulator, but it's very different to this regulator. So this regulator here, the fuel pressure comes in through that pipe around the side, and it actually enters through this area here, and then it bleeds pressure back into the fuel rail through this area here. So this is more of a fuel pressure restrictor, probably more than something that can actually control the total pressure. It can't increase pressure. All it can do is restrict the pressure that goes to the rail. So that's one, I suppose, big point that everyone needs to understand. This unit here, it controls the maximum pressure. This unit here, it controls a minimum pressure. And as you can see, it's got a fitting up here for the vacuum port. That gives you kind of a rising rate kind of a deal, because it is affected by boost pressure or vacuum. So what we've done, we've cut one of these up. This is the O-ring here that goes there. That filter here lives on a part that we've had to machine off. This unit here that you're kind of looking at, this face here is this face. There's a ball in there, and there's normally a spring that pushes the ball up against the seat. The seat is underneath there, and if you look at this pin here, this pin pushes the ball off the seat. So the pin actually pushes down through here, and it's got the capacity to push it up about 0.5 mil. What we probably need to really take away from this though, before we go any further, is the diameter of this ball is 7.1 millimeters. The diameter of this port here and the seat is 7.6, and this little diameter here, it's about 3 mil, but it's really kind of inconsequential, this diameter, because what you need to understand is the difference between this diameter and the area it sits in is 5 millimeters squared. This is the biggest restriction in the Megane fuel system. This pin over here you look at, basically the fuel pressure goes in. The fuel pressure kind of wants to push this seat off. Once it equalizes, then this disc here pushes back, and then this ball sits on the seat and doesn't let any more fuel go into the rail. So that's how it kind of maintains or reduces the pressure that's available to the injectors. It's affected by boost pressure, so as you get boost pressure on it, it pushes against this thing to push the pin off, but at the end of the day, it cannot provide more than the 550 kPa that this reg can deliver. All it does is step it down for idle and for part throttle. If you look at this unit here, you'll see it's got two little dimples. All the fuel has to flow past those two little dimples, because those dimples rest against this seat. So when it's locked in, it's all got to flow past there. If that lifts off, there's a little bit more area, but once again, you're restricted by the 5 millimeters squared area that's available, being the difference between the surface area of this ball and the surface area here of this diameter. The factory fuel pipes that run forward are 7.8 millimeters. The internal diameter is 6. the 6 millimeters squared area there, like diameter, equates to an area of 28.8 millimeters squared. So there's a massive restriction in this component. What does that mean for you? If you're running on 98 and you've got a normal kind of a tune, probably not much, to be honest. That system, it's more than adequate. It's going to supply you, you know, easily up to 320 horsepower at the engine without a problem. There's no issue with any of that on petrol. If you want to go to ethanol, it's probably going to get you about 350, I suppose. The standard fuel pump won't get to that, but that's about where you're at. We can probably get you to 420 at the engine with a fuel pump upgrade. Still going through this rig. Once you go past that, the restrictions in the system are just too big and the fuel pump cannot supply enough pressure. The factory fuel pipes start to become a problem. You've got 75 psi at the fuel tank when it leaves. Once you get to that flow that you need with E85 to be up around that 420 horsepower at the engine, you're going to see best part of like a 10 psi drop, which it's not terrible. You can kind of live with that, but it's starting to become a bit of an issue. We have an upgrade kit that basically replaces this valve here with like a billet aluminium piece that still seals it in. You move away from this restriction point altogether. You're limited by the maximum amount of fuel pressure this thing can produce, like the actual diaphragm itself. It's probably going to get you up to around that 450-ish kind of horsepower on E85. Maybe 420-ish on petrol, but the problem you have with 98 is you start to drag the knock sensors in when you're trying to achieve that kind of power on it. If you really want to go much above the 400 horsepower at the engine out of your Megane, you probably really need to start looking at the E85 option, just because it reduces the amount of knock incidents that you're going to have within the engine. But anyway, forgetting all that, basically all we're here today is just to show you kind of how this system works. So this rig that lives in your rail, it just reduces, it's like a variable restrictor, and it reduces the pressure in the rail available to the injectors. What you do need to understand is that everything has to flow through these two dimples. That tends to restrict how much fuel you can actually get in there. If we delete this with our delete option, what you'll find is you actually get a 5% increase in flow into the rail, and you can push the engines a little bit further. But that's not the point for today. Today was just about to try and explain how this unit works, because there is just so much misinformation out there. Thanks for taking the time. Look forward to catching up with you soon.